There are just so many incredible places in the world that most people will never visit, mostly because they are scared to go. And I think if you can get over that, it could make a really profound impact on your life.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Andy Hicks from Every Country by 50. Andy is on a quest to authentically experience every United Nations member country before his 50th birthday. He's got several years to go and just visited his 132nd country, Mozambique. In this episode, expect to hear about updated strategies for visiting every country, which countries are better for using points versus which ones don't really have any points opportunities, how to accomplish intense travel goals like this if you have a full-time job, and so much more. And if you are looking to maximize your points so you can travel like Andy, you can request a free personalized tutorial video for your next points trip. Just go to geobreezetravel.com/request. We pick one free tutorial to prepare every week, which you'll find in the free GeoBreeze Travel newsletter. So make sure you open our newsletter every Monday to see if your request was the one that we picked and prepared. And now, on with the show! Hello, Andy, and welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
Hello, Julia. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
I am excited to have you here. You are well on your way to visiting every country in the United Nations before the age of 50, and all while managing a business and juggling that with normal life things, marriage, dogs, running business, all of those different things, and doing a lot of it with points. We're going to talk today about speculative points transfers, when they make sense. But before we get into all of the different strategies for how you can juggle it all like this, tell us a little bit about you. What is your background? How did you get into the world of points and miles?
Yeah, well, so a small business owner. I started a little IT business way back in the dark ages in the late 90s when I was in high school, and still doing that as kind of my core thing. And with it being an IT business, we do sell equipment. So we have a client who they purchase 10 computers, whatever. We turn around, purchase that from Dell or whomever, and able to get that organic spend. So that has attributed greatly to kind of my points earning over the years, and really started to kind of monetize that really back in the early 2000s. I went to Rio for the first time in 2003. And on the flight back, I was in coach and I was wedged next to a guy who probably played for the NBA. And it was a pretty miserable experience. And I promised I would never fly coach if I could help it on a long haul flight again. And I've mostly stuck with that. So I do occasionally buy business class or do paid upgrades, but the vast majority is strictly on points, and points from pretty much all the platforms. Being in Denver, obviously very United heavy, but I am not on United metal very often internationally. I'm usually positioning from Chicago or New York or Dallas or Houston or something, then flying on Turkish or Ethiopian or Lufthansa, all the usual suspects.
When did you start this goal of trying to visit every country? How far along are you, and how many did you have when you got into points and miles and you were like, oh, this makes this a lot easier? Or what was kind of the order of things?
Yeah, well, it was kind of all over the place, really. I don't know what the specific moment or event was, but back around 2018, I had been to maybe at that point, I'd been to probably about maybe 50 to 60 countries. And at that time, it was strictly just, oh, India looks interesting. I'm going to go there. Or I had such a great time in Brazil the first time. I'm going to go back a second time. And there wasn't really much of an order to it. Some of it came down to where my husband wanted to travel or where friends would be traveling. And again, there was no goal of visiting all the countries, but I started reading about people who had done it. And I went to the Chicago Seminars Points and Miles Conference, which I'll be going to next week and actually speaking at. And Stefan Krasowski, who a lot of folks know I have tremendous admiration for, and he's become a good friend over the years. Didn't know who he was at the time, but I walk into a presentation. He's got a slide deck up and he's got a map of the world, all but two countries filled in. At that point, I think he was missing Yemen and Syria. The guy's a couple of months older than me. And I'm like, son of a bitch, how did this guy accomplish this? I'm feeling like a major loser now because he's trouncing me. And I feel like that was really the tipping point when I decided, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to set this goal of doing it before I turn 50 because I think that's realistic. It's actionable. It's something that maybe people can relate to. And it's something I can hold myself accountable to, that I've really got to stick with it versus just saying I'm going to do it before I die. I'm going to do it before I turn 50. I just completed a trip to Algeria, well, actually, Monaco, Algeria, and Mozambique. Because those are also similar. And that was last month. So Mozambique put me at, I think, about 132 on the UN list. So I'm 45 right now, and I'll be turning 46 in the not too distant future. So the clock is definitely ticking. And I have a feeling that my 49th year, my husband's just not going to see me for quite a while as I try to round all the bases. But yeah, so far,
What's your progress bar? How many countries are you at right now?
132
All right.
out of 193. Some people go strictly based on the United Nations list. Some people go by other
It's okay.
lists, such as
It's okay.
those by the Traveler Century Club, all that. But I'm just sticking with the UN list.
Perfect. All right. So, what is the budgeting strategy for this? For people who are trying to take all these flights, some of them into countries that are very difficult to get to, which ones are better with points and miles? Which ones are better as like cheap cash fares? Like, if someone's like, I want to do this, but I don't have gazillions of dollars, what are your recommendations?
Naturally, some countries are more expensive than others. Some regions are much more expensive than others to get to. If you're wanting to visit different parts of Antarctica, for instance, not a lot of points and mile strategies there. It's just freaking expensive, especially when you get to some of the harder places. But for the majority of places, even if an airline that's part of a major points and miles program may not get to that final mile, I'll usually try to get to the closest hub and then maybe book a discount carrier. If I can get to Dublin, for instance, I can hop a Ryanair flight to so many countries in Europe. So a lot of times I'll mix and match. My priority is I'm not a big enough prima donna that I've got to be up front for every single flight. My issue is I want to be able to sleep and have comfort on the longest portions. So as long as I can be in business across the water, or if I'm flying across Asia or something, as long as I can have that premium seat on that, I don't really care about a 2 or 3 hour flight. So I'll sometimes, if I'm going to be in Southeast Asia, for instance, sometimes I'll fly like to Dhaka or Colombo in Sri Lanka and then take a super cheap flight on to the place I'm actually planning to go. I think it's definitely a myth that this hobby has to be prohibitively expensive. Yes, there's going to be those expensive countries, and there's going to be those countries that are a lot more expensive in theory should be, which is a lot of West Africa. I mean, you can drop $300 a night on a hotel in a place that tourists simply aren't going, but oftentimes because that might be the only option in the city. But I think if you play the points and miles game right, you can get to the vast majority of these places for relatively low redemptions.
Which airline programs have you found most useful for covering the breadth of countries? Because some of them, they have a really good sweet spot, but they fly to one place. So, yeah, which airline programs have been most useful for you on your journey?
Well, I used to always say Avianca Life Miles, which Life Miles, I feel like a lot of people have a love hate relationship with their Avianca's back end. Technical stuff still leaves a lot to be desired with their website, just kind of arbitrarily not working, that sort of thing. But Ethiopian used to be easily bookable using Life Miles. So I fly a lot to Africa. I used to do a ton with Life Miles. Unless I'm mistaken, Ethiopian still doesn't work right now with Life Miles. So that's kind of a bummer. But Life Miles is still a solid program for me, especially with their Life Miles Plus the paid subscription, which gives you free cancellations and changes since their change fees are pretty high. So probably Life Miles would be one of my favorites. You know, United, again, being in Denver, even though I don't fly on United that frequently, United Mileage Plus miles are still very lucrative to me, especially for last minute Lufthansa bookings. Let me see. I can tell you that Delta is not. Delta Sky Pesos. I pretty much never use those unless I'm using them like on an Air China flight or something like that. BA miles or avios, I have had great luck with those on Qatar. I came back from Dubai a few months ago and got a really good redemption into Dulles in Q Suites. So those are great. And those have been no stranger to transfer bonuses, since you want to talk about that. I've definitely moved over a lot of points into Avios when those transfer bonuses have come along. Love Aeroplan for Star Alliance, and you can actually book Ethiopian with them. So I try to avoid Aeroplan when possible because of their change and cancellation fees, which are not that great.
You mentioned speculatively transferring points over into Avios, even if you're not sure when the next flight you're going to book is. Is that just because you're booking flights so often? How often are you taking one of these big international flights?
In a given year, I'll typically fly 10 to 12 long haul segments. And I know that speculative transfers are oftentimes ill advised by points and miles experts. And I can understand why, because if you've been around points and miles long enough, who hasn't dumped a bunch of miles into a program and then like 2 months later, there's a huge devaluation. So suddenly it's like those points are far less useful than they had been for you. But for me, since I am booking so many flights, I'm also booking flights for friends and family. I like to have a good mix of points across platforms. So I've got a couple 100,000 with Flying Blue, a couple 100,000 with Aeroplan, with Life Miles, with Avios, with Turkish, even though Turkish miles are not definitely as valuable as they were 2 years ago. They're still pretty valuable to me. But so far, and I may eat my words, but so far, I always end up finding a good redemption in a program if the miles don't expire before for the programs that they do expire with. I always end up finding something. So for me, it's like, okay, I may not use that million Avios I have. I may not use those next month, but something really good is going to come along maybe in a year. And that 30% transfer bonus will have really paid off.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense if people are constantly traveling, especially if it's with the same program over and over again, where you're like, I'm not booking anything today, but within the next 2 months, I'm going to fly something with insert your favorite program, whether it's Air France that has a lot of transfer bonuses, Avios, Air Canada often has some with Chase. So if you travel frequently, the rule can be a little bit more flexible for you. If you are one of those people where you're taking one big vacation per year for your family of 5 or maybe 2 big vacations per year, I would say that the usual wisdom still stands of don't transfer points speculatively, don't buy points on sale speculatively just because it's on sale if you only travel pretty occasionally. That being said, purchasing points, is that a strategy that you employ as well?
Yeah, and just to comment on what you said, 100%. I think that I know I'm an outlier. I'm not the typical person. As far as purchasing points, so I know oftentimes not recommended by the experts in the field because usually the purchase prices are just not that great. I have found exception with Life Mile. I still go back to my friendly little Life Miles, even though they can be a pain in the butt to use sometimes. Before I built up my healthy balance with Life Miles, I've got, I don't know, maybe 700,000 or something with them right now. But as I was still building that up, I would take advantage of their sales. They usually have a Cyber Monday, Black Friday sale, especially if you're buying like 100,000 or more and get the bonus. I believe you can get them like for like 1.3 cents. Does that sound right? Somewhere in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to track all my redemptions. Before our call, I took a glance at them just to kind of refresh my memory, but I used to track all my redemptions just to kind of see, like, realistically, what am I really getting? And time again with Life Mile, I was getting 3 to 5 and sometimes even beyond that, 3 to 5 cents per mile value. So if I can buy them at 1.3, 1.5 cents a mile, I'm still getting basically half off or greater of what that ticket would normally be.
Fantastic. Which are the countries that you think have been most challenging to get to? Where is it the stands or like parts of Africa? And what are your updated strategies for like 2025 or going into 2026 for these? Because those strategies change pretty often. So we'll start with what are the most difficult countries to get to?
Yeah, well, I feel like with just the kind of political climate, the biggest challenge for a lot of travelers, if they're wanting to get to some of these more interesting places, I was going to say dicier, but I'll say more interesting places, is going to be the visa. Case in point, I had it all planned out after much effort to go to Venezuela last year. And Venezuela has fairly egregious requirements for Americans, which I think they're only doing this because it's reciprocal. But you have to get criminal background check, all these things, which I did. And then you wait and they send you a WhatsApp message that it's been approved, which finally happened after like waiting for 3 months. And but the catch is you have to go to the consulate to pick it up. And the nearest, the at least the one I was working with was in Panama City, not Florida. So I burned some life miles, I think, to fly on Copa from Chicago to Panama City just to pick up this visa, which I was going to use later to go to Venezuela. And right when I was ready to fly out, that was when they had their election and things went south pretty quickly and consular services closed. And so that was all in vain. So didn't go to Venezuela. I've had some similar issues with other countries. I have a lot of friends who are trying to get to North Korea, also known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and Americans can't go there. Thankfully, I was able to go in 2016, so I got that out of the way. But as far as recent trips for me that might be difficult, like logistically, truthfully, it's just so easy now compared to people traveling even 10 years ago. I mean, you've got Turkish flying to basically every place you could possibly want. Well, obviously, not every place, but to so many places that the logistics of getting there is really not the problem. It's the visa of getting in. And then also, is that a country that has good diplomatic relations with the US? Are you going to be singled out potentially? We've seen that happen with folks in Russia and some other places. So for me, there are some countries that I'm avoiding that I've not been to yet that I'm avoiding strictly because I'm concerned about my safety once I do get there. And I'm hopeful that things will improve or that I'll be able to get a passport from a more favorable country in the near term and can go to those then.
Sounds good. Are there any that are logistically challenging with points specifically? Turkish is a great program. And like you mentioned, they're the most connected international airline in the world as far as how many countries they connect to. I don't remember how many that number is. It's well over 30. But are there some where there's just not a good points program that services the region or a specific country? And it's going to be like a weird cash flight on some airline that no one's ever heard of, maybe on a propeller plane, like for people to brace themselves if they want to do a similar goal to what you are trying to accomplish, what's on the road ahead?
Well, I was in Tajikistan not too long ago. I guess it was in June. And that was hard to find any kind of points or miles program. So I bought a ticket from, I was in Dushanbe, the capital city of Tajikistan. And I don't know if Turkish does operate there off the top of my head, but I know I spent a lot of time trying to figure out a points and miles strategy to get home from there. And what I ultimately settled on was to purchase a ticket on Air Tajik or something to Dubai. And the ticket was very cheap, but the process of purchasing it was fairly difficult. And I had to go through a third party booking agency to get it. But then once I got to Dubai, I was able to fly on Qatar from Dubai to Doha and then back to the US. That is the case with several of the stands. They can be a little tricky to get in and out of. But for most of those, if you can get to Istanbul on Turkish, then you can usually find a carrier that's flying from Istanbul onto there. The same is true in like Latin America. You can, of course, fly on United or American all day long to so many of the big gateways in South America, and then you could fly on LATAM or another airline onto where you need to go. I'm going to Chile in next month, actually, with my mother and my brother are going to come along, which will be interesting. And my mom's always wanted to go to Easter Island. So Easter Island that's a 5 hour flight from Santiago. It's basically, Pitcairn Island are the most isolated places in the world, pretty much, that are inhabited. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do points for this because we got to be in business for 5 hours. That's a long flight. And I just looked and looked and looked. I got on some of the travel blogs, Award Travel 101, Frequent Miler, all that. And the general consensus was you can get award space on LATAM, but it's very difficult. They only release a few seats. But that was an example of just purchasing the ticket made a lot more sense, which was a suggestion by several people. You can fly round trip from Santiago to Rapa Nui for, depending on the day, maybe $500 to $600. Or in our case, you could get business for 800. So I was like, okay, well, this is a pretty easy decision. And so I got business and told my mom about it. And she said, oh, I don't need to be in business for an extra $200. And I said, Mom, it's basically $20 an hour that you are paying to be on a 787 lie flat seat with nice food and wine and all that versus none of that way in the back. So that's a good recent example.
That's a good way to think about it as well, is like, what is it per hour to have that upgraded seat? And usually, like 200 is not bad at all, but it can run much more than that. But it's a good way to think about it, I think, as well.
I mean, I'm positioning out of Dulles for this trip in 2 weeks, and the flight from Denver to Dulles is $300 or something in coach, or like $1,200 for first class. And that's pretty ridiculous. But 20 bucks an hour, I'll pay it all day long.
Nice. As you've gone through 130 some countries and you're well on your way to completing your goal, what would you say is your number one tip for everybody who is trying to accomplish something the same way, especially if they are trying to do as much of it as possible with points and miles?
Well, recognizing that a lot of people have regular jobs and they may not have the kind of organic spend that a small business owner would, I would recommend really getting into the card sign up game, which you are an expert, easily in the top 1% of folks in your space. So I know you've got tons and tons of content on card strategies, but this is what I tell my friends. And I know at cocktail parties, their eyes start glazing over within 5 minutes. When people like you and I are together, we can just go, we can talk and talk for hours. But I really try to help encourage people to not be scared of the credit card game if you're playing your cards right. Oh my God, that unintended. But if you're managing things right and staying on top of your credit and all the things, keeping your utilization where it needs to be and all that, I think that's the number one thing, is that the average person, especially if they're using like third party sites like Plastic and things like that to pay their mortgage, or they have the built card or one of those, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to rack up several 100,000 points a year in sign up bonuses. So that goes a long way. I know a lot of people are not as concerned about flying in business. And naturally, those points go so much further for economy. But the number one thing from kind of a philosophical standpoint, I think, and this is what my friend Lucy Shu and I will be speaking about next week, is for people who are really looking to truly experience the world and actually go to memorable, magical places and not just the same old, okay, Western Europe, Mexico, some of the Caribbean, whatever, is just to get over your fear and make that first trip to somewhere that's a little bit off the beaten path, that people, your friends might tell you, oh no, it's dangerous or something, but it really isn't. And some examples that come to mind would be India, would be Jordan, so many countries in Africa, Namibia, Uganda, Rwanda, Mozambique. There are just so many incredible places in the world that most people will never visit, mostly because they are scared to go. And I think if you can get over that, it could make a really profound impact on your life.
Fantastic tips. And speaking of great tips and recommendations, can you recommend somebody else on the internet that people should go follow if they want to do a similar thing of visiting all the countries in the world by a certain point in time?
Naturally, there's a lot of great YouTubers out there and influencers who have documented or are actively documenting their trips, which I think is a really great place to start. So you can actually visualize these places. Drew Bensky is one that comes to mind. My buddy Rick Gazari, who organizes the Extraordinary Travel Festival, and I'm giving him a plug, but not only because I do believe in what he's doing, but they're doing a third one in Bangkok next year. I've been to the first two of these, but Rick Global Gaz is his handle, and he has podcasts where he interviews people who have completed the UN list or are actively doing it. He interviewed me for reasons unknown. I guess he just needed to fill a spot, but he's interviewed far more prolific people. But he also has a good website where he's documented his own trips. My buddy Ed Hotchkiss, exploringed.com, he's a wonderful writer and extensively has documented a lot of his trips. There's a lot of folks in the space who've done a good job of documenting their travels. Additionally, some wonderful resources that the beginner through advanced traveler can look at are organizations of extreme travelers, such as Most Traveled People, MTP. Their founder, Charles Veely, is one of the first documented people to go to every country in the world. He's a real kind of hero to a lot of us. There's Nomad Mania, organized by Harry Macedas, also a really spectacular guy. He's been to every country in the world twice and is on a path to do it a third time. And then there's the Travelers Century Club, which is the oldest organization for extreme travelers. And they have chapters all over the country and actually in the world. And we're very lucky to have one in my hometown of Denver, but they have chapters in plenty of other places as well. And that's a wonderful resource for people who are getting into this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Andy. That was a lot of resources. So I'm sure people will have a fun time digging through all of those. Highly recommend going to some different events because that's where the magic really happens is meeting people in person. And I'm excited to see you at Chicago seminars. And
Me too.
thank you so much for joining us today. This was fun.
Thank you, Julia. Have a great day. See you soon. Take care.